Wale Oluwo, Managing Director, BGL Securities, is here with us, and we're looking at the asset management company as a vehicle or exit to help banks, rescued banks, recapitalize. Good morning, welcome.
Good morning.
It's been a while. Thank you. It's so good to have you on our program again. Now, let's analyze the AMC for a bit. Now, the central bank says that it's going to serve as a vehicle or exit for banks' recapitalization. Give us your thoughts on that. Do you agree with this?
No, I think that is going to be the consequence of the AMC operations. I think conceptually it's supposed to help banks to find a way to deal with their toxic assets.
The rescued banks, you
The rescued banks,
okay.
to deal with their... No, not only the rescued banks. A lot
all
of
the
banks
commercial
have
banks.
toxic...
Okay.
But
okay.
all the banks have
yes.
one form of toxic asset or the other. So what is going to happen is those that have their capital impaired by the fallout of these toxic assets, when they are resolved, then their capital can be resolved. So it's not an issue of opening a window for banks to recapitalize, really. It's just opening a window for banks to be in a position to resolve their toxic asset problem. But with regards to the AMC, I think my concern in the first instance is the time that it has taken in putting this AMC together, considering how important this process is to the entire financial system. Now, you find a situation where a lot of banks have already provided for these toxic assets, and you might come with the AMC and they are not in a position to take advantage of that window, because we can create the AMC, but we cannot force the financial institutions to patronize the AMC.
Okay, so it's not compulsory.
It can't be compulsory, because these are asset managers and they are going to determine whether the kind of valuation they are getting through the AMC window is the best for them, or whether a decision to hold will best serve the interests of their business and their shareholders. So there's no compulsion about this. That is why the issue of valuation is still going to play a major role in determining how people will take advantage of the AMC, or whether people will stay away from the AMC process.
Now, it's taken quite a while for us to see, for this bill to see the daylight, like you mentioned earlier. It's still, it hasn't been passed.
Yeah,
yes,
as we speak, the president
for
has not signed it.
Do you have any idea when we might see this? Because so much is being said about it, and yet we're waiting. Like you said, you mentioned that the gravity, the importance of this bill, or what it would do, what it could do for the banks, but still has not been passed.
It has not been passed.
So that means that for us to feel the effect, or the banks to feel the effect, the impact, the positive impact of the AMC, it might take a while. This is the first. We're already in the month of June.
Yeah, you are correct, because the AMC is a process. Although it's a company, but bringing it to life is going to take a process. We are going to go through the process of legislation, and I know the lower house, I think, passed it about 2-3 months ago, and the Senate harmonized it, and I think that was passed over a month ago. Now, between the time it was passed and the fact that the president has not assented is a problem, because we don't know what is delaying it. Could it be that whatever was passed by the two houses does not fit into the expectation of the central bank? We don't know. But somebody must come out in the open and say, look, the bill that was passed and the way it was passed and the content therein does not seem to, synchronize with their expectation and what they expect the AMC to achieve. So if that be the case, then we have to go back to the legislature and see how we can resolve the problem. But I want to expect that if there is no conflict of expectation and content, then clearly I see that, I want to assume that the president will assent to the bill probably by the end of the month or early June. That is the legislative part of it, but you now have to come to the operational and the setup part. Okay,
let's say it's passed in the month of June.
Let's say it's passed in the month of June.
What next? What is going to follow immediately after that?
It's going to be the setup process. You're going to have to put a panel together. You're going to have to appoint a managing director for the AMC and the senior management team.
All of that could take how long?
Let me not be speculative here, but let me say that, recruiting people takes probably 30 days, depending on the kind of work they are doing with their present employers and how long it will take for them to disengage.
Sorry to butt in. Can't that be done right now? As considering the fact that it's already late, it's yet to be passed. Because the process of, like you said, recruiting, we don't know how long that is going to take, and all of this is weighing. We're talking
you're looking at the process where they should start that and it's simultaneous.
Perhaps,
no,
yeah. Well,
systems don't work like that. You see, you can do that in the private sector, but in the public sector, it's still very speculative. What if the president does not sign? What if nothing happens?
But central bank seems to be confident that something will happen and that the banks will be able to recapitalize.
I'm also confident that this will happen. But the central bank is not the presidency. What if the presidency brings something completely different from what the central bank was thinking about, and that takes another 3 months? So you don't want to begin a process that is still uncertain and very speculative. So for me, I think the best approach is to see how we can get the president to assent to the bill.
First of all,
then we fast track the process, even if it means working 24 hours and making sure all the stakeholders come together. And then you fast track the process, and then you put the AMC in a position to commence operation probably early July or middle July or end of July. It doesn't matter. But the most important thing is for the AMC to come in, be able to sit down, put together its operational framework, its procedures, its policies, its processes, the IT platform, and then the valuation method that they are going to employ in getting these assets to move forth and back.
Do you think, what can you give us an idea of what that process might look like?
In terms of valuation?
In terms of valuation.
No, what I see is this. I have a personal opinion here. It's not the opinion of my institution. But my personal opinion is that when it comes to valuation, there is no valuation process or method that is superior to that is determined by the market. So market has shown over time to be the most, critical valuer of assets, and it's the market that will set a price. Because any other price is set that is outside the market, it's going to be artificial and it's going to create some black market, because that price will not clear the market, and people will start cutting this underground. So I've seen people come across and say AMC can take on the assets and apply 20% premium, 10% premium. All these things are substantially artificial. I think the AMC is supposed to achieve 3 things. 1, to bring back confidence. 2, to bring liquidity. And 3, to facilitate a process where all the markets will feel the impact of its setup. The money market, the capital market, the foreign exchange market, and the whole spectrum of our market, even the commodities market and the real estate market. Because if people can unlock money that have been stocked in the capital market for the past 2.5 years, then these monies can find their way into other sectors. Now, with regards to valuation, if the AMC positions itself and immediately it is set up, the first thing it does is to see how it can leverage its capital. But whatever capital is starting with now is not sufficient. But the good thing is that what is being passed seems to put the AMC in a position to be able to borrow using the guarantees of the central bank. Whether the presidency will accept that or not, I don't know. What
about some of the funds that it hopes to retrieve from 640 billion injected to the rescue banks? Isn't that part of money funds that it will use to take off?
No, you see, there is a defined capital for the AMC, which is being contributed by the central bank and the Ministry of Finance. But the AMC is going to be able to borrow from the market by issuing instruments, maybe bonds and whatever. So the airline can do that, assuming it gets a capital of 500 billion, let's say hypothetically, and it can immediately raise like 1 trillion from the market. Then it gives the market confidence that there's a big brother somewhere who can mop up, who has the capacity, financial this time, to be able to mop up. And that brings confidence immediately, because people know when we throw large volumes into the market, there is a mechanism that can absorb it. So that brings the confidence that we talked about. Then liquidity will come on the back of that, and then you have a process that is self-equilibrating.
Now, how will this AMC help boost bank shares?
What it will do is this. Luckily for the banks, they've been forced to do a lot of provisioning. So all those toxic assets, I'm sure they must have provided for them substantially. Having done that, by the time these assets are being converted to cash, all these monies will go directly back to income on cash basis. And when income is enhanced, clearly the value of the shares will go up. People will get dividends. People will get other benefits like bonuses and what have you.
Now, some of the rescued banks were given a recapitalization option within 2 years, up until August 2011. What do you see happening, the likely scenario for these banks?
Well, I think the negative we have in those banks, on account of the kind of severe provisioning that we have seen, I guess in the last 6-8 months, is such that no matter the provisions they've made for their toxic assets, there are still a hole. Whether it is real, we don't know until events will prove it right. The banks, some of the banks might be lucky, at least those ones that are fairly okay, to have a situation where by the end of that period, they may not need to bring any capital injection from outside. Because for you to capitalize, you don't necessarily have to bring money from outside. You can capitalize by making sure your loan recovery process, succeeds substantially, and it brings back a lot of the capital. You can also recapitalize if you are making money and capitalizing the profits that you get from your activities. So it's only when you still have deficiency after looking at these two windows that you can now say, okay, let me look outside and get new investments in. Some banks will be lucky, they will not even need to look for outside money by the expiration of that date. But some clearly will need to. Now the question will be this: what kind of instruments are they going to use?
Are we looking at
are we looking at fixed income instruments? Are we looking at rights issue? Are we looking at public offers?
What's the likelihood of a rights issue? How do you think the market will take? How do you think the market will embrace or react to a rights issue if any of these banks, considering what the burst we saw in the market and how these banks played a major role in the burst?
Well, I think the issue is much more deeper than that. Let me put it this way. Rights issue or any issue whatsoever is a function of the value proposition. So you have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. If people see value, they'll put their money. But what might constitute a challenge is the position of the existing shareholders, those that are giving the shares of the banks now. Now, mind you, whether you are doing a rights issue, or you are doing a bond issue, or public offer for fresh issues, whichever way you are raising capital, the existing shareholders must approve a resolution accepting those offers to be made. So the first challenge is to get around that. If the existing shareholders have money, they might likely say, okay, let's do a rights issue so that we put our money and keep our banks. That would be the best option for the existing shareholders. Probably CBN might be looking at a situation where new owners will come in. And mind you, a lot of people have shown interest in taking over these banks. But
are you referring to private individuals or some of the commercial banks themselves?
No. A lot of interested parties, international institutions,
foreign investors, okay.
Private individuals, corporates, and whatever. But the challenge is, we don't have shares to sell for now. The only shares existing in these banks are domiciled with the existing shareholders. The injection of the central bank into the banks is by way of long-term loans. So it does not confer shareholding status on them. So I think the first challenge, if there is a need to have an external recapitalization process, is to see how they can bring the shareholders into the negotiation table in order to get their support and resolution to either bringing in new shareholders or bringing in more funds from their own resources or some other ways that the bank can do it. But whatever way forward must take account of the existing shareholders. It's just too critical.